Who was the first Chinese to realize that modern science in the Ming Dynasty had fallen far behind that of the West? And who was the one who, in that closed and isolated Chinese empire, passionately experimented in the fields of modern science? It was actually the illustrious and distinguished pioneer of Chinese modern science, Xu Guangqi. Today's scholars go further. They describe him as the forerunner of modern science in China and the first Chinese to open his eyes to the outside world. Looking at Xu Guangqi's life, how did this scholar, steeped in traditional Chinese Confucian thought, become a forerunner of science? What is the real story behind the life of Xu Guangqi? In the Roman archives of the Catholic Jesuit order, we found a 400-year-old picture. The figure on the left is the Catholic missionary Matteo Ricci. The figure on the right definitely depicts Xu Guangqi. This picture is evidence of Xu Guangqi and Matteo Ricci's association 400 years ago. It was Matteo Ricci that caused Xu Guangqi to make an extraordinary choice in his life. In 1583, Matteo Ricci arrived in ancient China to spread the gospel. It was a happy coincidence that brought Matteo Ricci and Xu Guangqi together. It was the start of a friendship that turned out to be the first instance of Chinese and Western cultural exchange in modern history. When Matteo Ricci first set foot on this part of the mysterious Eastern continent, those who met him were Chinese who had no knowledge of the outside world. Western natural science, having received its baptism by the Renaissance, had made rapid progress. Matteo Ricci made efforts to be identified with Confucian scholars because he realized that they held the keys to the highest levels of power. Based on his experience in the West, Ricci believed that the most learned people would be the clergy. He therefore donned the robes of Buddhist monks, hoping to win the respect of the native people. He later realized that this was a mistake, and so he and his companions began wearing Confucian-style robes, designed by Ricci himself. In order to prove to the Chinese that Europeans were not barbarians, Ricci often carried with him some of his precious artifacts. Aside from the Bible and paintings of Jesus' mother Mary, he had many articles that the Chinese considered mysterious and fascinating. These included an alarm clock, a spinet, globes, spheres, astrolabes, horologes, and his map of the world. The most probable reason for Xu's interest in meeting Ricci was Ricci's famous map of the world. This map was drawn by Ricci himself. The glass prism that he had planned to present to the emperor still remained in its elegant brocade case. Although his missionary work had encountered obstacles, along the way Ricci's European articles attracted great interest among high officials, and many people wanted to meet with him. Even more important was the fact that those mysterious Chinese characters were no longer unfamiliar to Ricci. On his long journey, Ricci used a spatial memory device to compose the outline for a Chinese character dictionary. This method of memorizing, for later Chinese scholars, was referred to as the mysterious Western art of memory. It became Ricci's most effective resource for arousing the curiosity of Chinese wherever he went. Xu Guangqi, in 25 sentences, praises Ricci, saying that his first impression was that of a gentleman of unlimited insight and knowledge of the world. In explaining his map, Ricci described the Earth, stating that it was round. He delineated 5 continents and pointed out individual countries. He also introduced principles for determining the equator, the 5 zones, longitude and latitude. Ricci's world map was truly astonishing. For the first time, Xu Guangqi could actually see where China was located among the countries of the world. The direction of Xu Guangqi's life was completely changed because of this map. He took up the path of science, a path that was to connect China to the rest of the world. In 1601, the year after Matteo Ricci and Xu Guangqi met for the first time in Nanjing, Ricci received news that created great excitement throughout the entire Jesuit community. The Chinese emperor had summoned Matteo Ricci to the Forbidden City for an audience. Now, after a 3-year separation, Xu Guangqi finally had frequent opportunities to study with Matteo Ricci. By this time, Xu Guangqi was already a devout Catholic. He assisted Ricci in publishing several books on religious doctrine. Matteo Ricci, at age 57, had lived for years in the dry, cold climate of the imperial capital. This Jesuit missionary spent the latter half of his life sharing his knowledge of modern Western science, technology, and thought with Chinese, enabling them to explore new horizons. At the same time, he was the first one to present Chinese moral and religious thought to Europe, laying the foundation for future Chinese studies. Xu Guangqi enthusiastically proposed that the imperial court invite Jesuit missionaries to revise the calendar that had been in use continually since the beginning of the Ming Dynasty. It had not been revised for 300 years and was extremely inaccurate. To Xu Guangqi's great delight, the court agreed at once to this proposal, but the plan did not develop as he had hoped. The imperial ministers did not want red-haired, blue-eyed foreign missionaries revising the calendrical system handed down to them by their ancestors. The plan to revise the calendar died an early death. Xu Guangqi was disappointed and frustrated. On August 29, 1629, Xu made an appeal in the name of the Ministry of Rites, suggesting renovation of the calendar. This was the second time in 16 years that he had tried to correct the seriously inaccurate Datong calendar. After 3 days, Xu Guangqi's memorial received approval by the emperor. Each of these experts used his most effective methods. In the end, the predictions of the Jesuits proved most accurate. The predictions of the old members of the Astronomical Bureau were proven erroneous. This competition convinced everyone that the more advanced European Tikhonic calendrical system used by the Jesuits should replace the Chinese and Muslim systems and become the official system of the Astronomical Bureau. The tranquil atmosphere of the calendar office was suddenly disrupted by the Manchu Cavalry. In the winter of 1629, the huge Manchu army successfully penetrated the Ming Empire's fortifications in several northern locations, posing a direct threat to Beijing. Xu Guangqi, who enjoyed the trust of the Chongzhen Emperor, now received a new mission. He was to command and train the troops of the imperial city.